It is my distinct pleasure and my honor to introduce today Joanne Deliar, who is a traditional elder with our Ryerson Aboriginal Student Services, as well as our Ryerson Educational Council. Without further ado, it'd be great to have Joanne come up here and do a traditional opening for us. Thank you.
Okay, obviously I'm a little shorter than Anne. Thank you very much for that introduction. You have no idea how excited and thrilled I am to be here today to do an opening. My professional career has been over 30 years working with mental health and addiction issues as a counselor, so this is very, very exciting. The idea of a traditional opening is to bring us all together in the same place. I'm going to announce myself in my ancestral language, and I will be saying that my name is Shadowhawk Woman. I'm from the Wolf Clan, and I'm Omashkigo. See, Omashkigo. Didn't get a chance to tell you about that word. So I just ask that you listen to the big prayer with your heart. It's meant to put us all on the same page. Wache, Saha Kutam, Kashashin Ishku, Mayingandodam, Omashkigo. First of all, Creator, I say Chi-miigwech for this day that you've offered to each of us. Let us open our hearts and open our minds to a new way of seeing and a new way of being. I also thank you for this opportunity to be here today to open this event in a good way. I ask that you support each of us, watch over our families and our loved ones, and continue to support this good work that is being initiated here today. And I offer you this prayer. O Great Spirit, whose voice I hear on the winds, whose breath gives life to the whole world, hear me. I come before you, one of your children. I am small and weak, and I need your strength and wisdom. Let me walk in beauty. Make my eyes ever behold the red and purple sunset. Make my hands respect the things that you have made, my ears sharp to hear your voice. Make me wise, so I may know the things that you have taught my people, the lessons you have hidden in every leaf and rock. I seek strength, not to be superior to my brothers and sisters, but to be able to fight my greatest enemy, myself. Make me ever ready to come to you with clean hands and straight eyes, so when life fades like a fading sunset, my spirit may come to you without shame. I say, Chi-miigwech, 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 Chi-miigwech. Aho, all my relations. Just a couple of explanations there. Clean hands means that when you've made a mistake, you do your very best to make it right. Straight eyes mean you walk and speak your truth so that you are going through life in a good way. And Chi-miigwech means thank you very much. I just wanted to share one other teaching. A long time ago when I came into the mental health field, I was told by an elder, when you're talking to a schizophrenic person, pay very, very close attention, because we believe that that person goes through the crack in the universe and speaks the truth. Thank you very much.
Good morning and welcome. My name is Dr. Denise O'Neill Green, and I'm the Assistant Vice President, Vice Provost for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at Ryerson University. First, I'd like to start by acknowledging that Ryerson sits on the traditional territories of the Mississaugas and New Credit First Nations. And we appreciate being a part of the Aboriginal community among our faculty, staff, and students. Chimigwech. Today, we are very honored that the Ontario Human Rights Commission is launching its policy on preventing discrimination based on mental health and addiction disabilities at Ryerson. Here, we are examining and developing institution-wide systemic responses to mental health and well-being, and the release of this policy will certainly aid us in achieving greater equity, diversity, and inclusion with respect to this very important issue. I want to personally thank Barbara Hall, her team, and the Ontario Human Rights Commission for the important work that they are doing, and very much look forward to hearing more about the policy. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you so much. I am Kevin Marsh from the Ontario Human Rights Commission, and I will be your traffic cop today. We have a good event scheduled for you today, a lot of information. We will try and keep it moving along so that we're able to get away on time. Greetings especially to friends who are watching us on a webcast this morning. Welcome. Nice to not see you, but I hope you can see us well enough. We will also be live tweeting and blogging this event as we go through. Usually at events like this, we ask people to take their telephones and turn them off. In this case, why not leave it on for a moment and follow us on Twitter? Or become our friend on Facebook. We like you either way. That's enough from me for the moment. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Chief Commissioner of the Ontario Human Rights Commission, Barbara Hall.
Thank you, Kevin. Doesn't he have a wonderful radio voice? Welcome, everyone, and thank you, Elder Joanne, for giving us your words and setting us on a good pathway today as we learn and share together. And thank you to Dr. O'Neill Green for welcoming us and your comments. It's great to have partners like you at Ryerson, you and also Anne. Where's Anne? They are right there. Have worked so closely with us, and we're delighted to be here today. And hello to everyone out across the city, across the province. Ryerson, in fact, were our hosts in this same room almost 2 years ago when we launched our Minds That Matter consultation report on mental health and addiction disabilities. That report outlined what we had heard from the biggest consultation in the history of the Commission when we went out across the province, asking people to share with us their experience of barriers and discrimination, of solutions to barriers and discrimination because of mental health issues and addictions. Minds That Matter, that report, was designed to complement the work that's already being done in the area of mental health and addictions, and to add a human rights focus to some of the work that lies ahead. And as I said, everyone who came forward didn't just talk about problems, they also came to talk solutions. Many of these are reflected in that report's 54 recommendations that we made for government, employers, housing providers, service providers, and other organizations. They range from calling on municipalities to remove minimum distances for group homes, to urging governments to honor their commitments under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, to respect the rights of persons with mental health disabilities. The report also included a lot of recommendations for us so that we could do our part to advance human rights for persons with mental health disabilities or addictions. These commitments became our roadmap and have helped us move forward in our work. We've already achieved a number of them. For example, we've been involved in several legal cases, including a landmark settlement that focuses on the mental health needs of prison inmates, and a case at the Ontario Municipal Board where a city's zoning bylaw imposed minimum separation distances that were preventing a group home from moving to a newer, safer location. We've also worked with the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police on police record checks. We've made a start there, but we know that there's a lot more work that needs to be done. One of our biggest commitments was to release a policy on preventing discrimination because of mental health disabilities and addictions. And I'm proud to say that today we've achieved that goal. You'll hear some of the policy's finer details later this morning, but there's one central premise the policy follows. People with mental health disabilities and addictions are protected from discrimination under the Ontario Human Rights Code. They have the same rights as anyone else at work, where they live, where we get services, and even where we play. And we're all responsible for making sure they realize these rights. So we're here today to launch a policy. I was telling my grandson, 6-year-old grandson in Vancouver last night, that I was busy reading to launch a policy today. And he said, "Policy schmolicy. What are you talking about, Grandma?" So what is a policy and what does it actually do? Well, in fact, a number of things. The Human Rights Code says you shall not discriminate based on disabilities, period. What exactly does that mean? What does it mean in terms of rights or responsibilities? It doesn't talk about what the requirement to not discriminate means for an employer or a landlord or a service provider. It doesn't tell a person facing discrimination what their rights are or how to defend those rights. Ontario Human Rights Commission policies help fill in this missing information. They represent our best advice and interpretation of the code, of the spirit of the code. Our new policy on preventing discrimination because of mental health disabilities and addictions also helps to clarify the law and offers guidance and best practices to help organizations respond to discrimination and prevent it from happening in the future. Our policies also play a role in the legal arena. They're often considered by tribunals and courts at all levels and are often applied to the facts of their cases and quoted in their decisions. This policy will play the same role. We wanted this policy to reflect the lived reality of persons with mental health disabilities and addiction. The policy talks about key issues affecting the community in employment, housing, and services. Current case law to provide clarity on rights and obligations, and guidelines, including best practices on how to meet the needs of people with mental health disabilities and addictions. At this time, I'd like to give a special welcome to AJ. Can someone hand me a copy of the policy? Sorry, I didn't bring it up. AJ's painting, Arcadia 1, is used on the policy's cover and all the accompanying materials. AJ, wave out to everyone. AJ is a member of Workman Arts, an organization that promotes a greater public understanding of mental illness and addiction through the creation, presentation, and discussion of artistic media. Thank you, AJ, for your beautiful contribution to this policy. So, with this here today, we've delivered on another of our commitments related to mental health. But this is just the beginning of a much bigger job. Taking the words in this document and making them a lived reality for people across our province. We're committed at the Commission to doing that through education, training, public inquiries, or litigation. But we can't do it without you. You're the people who know what it takes to advance human rights in neighborhoods, workplaces, and services. So let's do it together. We'll be promoting the policy across the province, and we're very open to any ideas or opportunities you can offer to help us make sure all Ontarians know their human rights and their responsibilities when it comes to mental health and addiction disabilities. In his statement inside the policy on the front cover there, AJ says, "When words fail, pictures remain, and that reality is what you paint." I encourage you all to work with us to put this policy into practice so what starts with words ends up being a real-life picture of inclusion and acceptance across Ontario. Thank you for being here with us today.
We can't do this work at the Commission by ourselves. We do a lot. We try to understand. We're so dependent on the people, like the people in this room today, to understand how things really work. And one of the things that we have asked is a few speakers from the community to come and talk to you about the policy and their understanding of it. First, I'd like to introduce Lucy Costa, who is the Systemic Advocate for the Empowerment Council, which is a voice for clients of CAMH. Lucy.
Thank you for inviting me to the launch of the Minds That Matter policy on preventing discrimination. I want to give a special shout out to the students from the United Kingdom's University of Central Lancashire. When they heard about this, they all booked a plane flight to come to Toronto. And I specifically want to dedicate my humble words to the students of the Star Learning Centre who are here today as well. This is an important moment in the history and evolution for rights and for citizens with mental health and addictions histories. Obviously, as an advocate, I believe strongly in the power of rights, in the Ontario Human Rights Code, in the Charter, as a vehicle to confront and unsettle powerful institutional structures and practices that work against distributive justice, sometimes doing so in very quiet and invisible ways. We're not here because human rights or policy positions are just a box to tick off in a stagnant machinery of footmen trying to do the right thing or say the right thing. Making rights real, as Barbara said as well, is imperative, it's hard, and it's messy. Rights for people with mental health and addiction histories are bound up with issues of poverty, race, gender, culture, and other qualities that define us as human beings. Even though sometimes we feel that rights only work for a select privileged few, it's important to remember not to give up, that we're valuable, to remember our voice does count, and that sometimes we have to find our voice in the most forsaken moments. Collectively, we also have a responsibility to help each other. One of my favorite lines from the Ontario Human Rights Policy says this: "The ultimate responsibility for maintaining an environment free from discrimination and harassment rests on employers, housing providers, service providers, and other parties covered by the code. It's not acceptable to choose to stay unaware of discrimination, of harassment, of a person with mental health disability or addiction, whether or not that person has made a human rights claim." So I'll end with a dare to us all, that we can become more aware. When we over-rely on the language of stigma, and I speak about stigma because stigma is the predominant term that has been used in campaigns for change, and it's a word you hear a lot in the community when you're talking about rights. When we use the word stigma, it invisibilizes the who behind the stigmatizing action. So the next time you hear or use the word stigma, I dare you to name and identify who is doing the stigma. Let's make it visible so that we can better understand how discrimination functions and so that we can help each other to work through it to create a more equitable world. My sincere gratitude and congratulations to the staff of the Human Rights Commission for their hard work in bringing this policy document to life and for listening to the voice of service users who want the best policy to steer us in the rights direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucy. Our next speaker is a member of the Dream Team, Leslie Miller. Leslie says he became a member of the Dream Team because he got upset about the poor quality of supports for mental health and addiction consumer survivors. Leslie.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I want to thank the Commission for inviting the Dream Team to be represented here today, and I want to thank the Dream Team for asking me to be their representative here today. It's indeed an honor and a privilege to be speaking to such an esteemed audience and at such an important event. I did have a chance to get familiarized with this document handbook a few times over the past few days, and I must say I'm very impressed. Having said, when I was asked to come here today because the Dream Team is all about anti-stigma and advocating for more supportive housing for people with mental health and/or addiction issues, I was asked if I could share with you a personal example or lived experience of discrimination that I personally experienced in a housing situation because of. And I said, yeah, I can do that. Then it was further suggested to me that if possible, I could maybe come up with a personal lived experience of how I've experienced discrimination in employment, medical or other services, and in housing. Although I've long time ago, I let go of the hurt and anger I experienced when these circumstances I'm about to share with you happened, I do need to say out loud that I do find it somewhat disturbing that in a society that is progressive as ours here in Ontario, and don't get me wrong, I'm very grateful to live here, I find that it is somewhat disturbing that instantaneously, like in a snap of a second in my mind, I came up with these examples. First of all, medical services. It's not unusual, in fact, on a regular basis that my fellow peers do share with me that when they went to emergency rooms, that because they have mental health issues, when they go to emergency with some sort of physical discomfort, they are often told, often with very little or any examination at all, they're told, there's nothing wrong with you. It's all in your mind. Go home. Actually, just when I was on my way here this morning, I ran into a fellow peer, and I asked him to read this over, told him where I was going, and he shared with me about how he went to the hospital one time after experiencing a stroke. And they told him he was having hallucinations and sent him home. Subsequently, an hour later, he went to another hospital, and they recognized that he had, in fact, experienced a stroke, and did, of course, give him adequate treatment. My personal experience is because in one hospital where my file is red flagged, addict, I one time went to an emergency where, because of my hepatitis C, my feet and calves were bloated with very painful and extreme inflammation. The doctor on call that night took a 30-second peek at my feet, and he said to me, "Your file says that you're an addict. We do not dispense pain medication to addicts here, and this is not a detox center. Go home." I had not even hinted at all that I wanted pain medication. I only wanted something to reduce the inflammation. But before I was able to assert that, he was quickly gone without another word or a chance to hear me. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip over the employment example. But I want to share with you that just prior to moving into Edmund Place, and I encourage you to Google Edmund Place. It's the most progressive supportive housing in Canada that I know about. But just before moving into Edmund Place, where I'm living now, I was living in a slumlord boarding house, that's describing it lightly, that I actually later produced a video about, and you can find the video on YouTube if you search Not My Home - behind boarding house walls. I was in very dire need of a more adequate place to live. A local social service agency referred me to two separate places that were supposed to be serving people with mental health and/or addiction issues. And I went to these two places, and they outright refused me, and they were not shy at all about giving the reasons why. They wanted to circumvent the probability that I may be or would become more of a problem or a burden to them than other tenants whom have only mental health issues. However, one may feel that there may be a possibility and some truism to that. To me, that was still pure discrimination. They did not want me because I'm an alcoholic, an addict. So having shared these experiences with you as brief as I have described because of lack of time, I've really only scratched the surface, really. I'd like to leave you with these two closing thoughts. I'm only one of many thousands, if not more, of people living in Ontario who live with mental health and/or addiction issues. And I'm far from unique, very far from unique, for whom this type of discriminatory lived experience is an everyday, daily occurrence. This is why today I personally live, breathe, and sleep anti-stigma advocacy. It's what I wake up for every morning. So it's my sincere hope that in this event here today, and with the release of this document, handbook policy, that will help lessen, and I say lessen because in my reality, it says that we can only dream of elimination, that this event here today will arise more awareness and consciousness, and that going forward here in Ontario, we can become an example to the world that discriminatory practices towards people with mental health and/or addictions is not only unacceptable on so many levels, but that here going forward in Ontario, it will not be tolerated whatsoever. Thank you very much.
One of our commissioners, Bagot Taggart, to come to the stage, please, and offer some concluding remarks to this portion of the program. Bagot?
Thank you, Kevin. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Mental health and addiction disabilities affect all of us in Ontario. We all know a friend, a relative, or a co-worker who is dealing with a mental health issue. And we all have seen what happens when people's rights are ignored. Law, to some extent, based on precedent, does not concern itself with the moral duties of generosity. That's why documents like the policy we launched today are so important. They help us create an Ontario where people with mental health disabilities and addictions can feel that they are included, valued, and that they have a contribution to make. Overcoming discrimination based on mental health issues or addictions is a job that no one person or an organization can do on their own. We all have to share the responsibility, and we can accomplish more when we work together as partners. I'd like to thank some of the partners who have made this launch happen this morning. The most importantly, Ryerson University. We are thankful to the Ryerson. Dr. Denise O'Neill Green and her team and Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Office. We thank the staff with Discrimination and Harassment Prevention Services and Whiteside, Inthuza Ramachandran, and Kate Solomon. We also offer our thanks to Ryerson staff and their areas who have made the event run so well. Thanks go to campus planning, food services, and CCS media services. And I want to thank two Ryerson students. I don't know if they're here, great volunteers, Arch Best and Manoj Nikam. Our thanks to our ASL interpreters, Penny Shin-Kirol and Carrie Grantfield, and our captionist, Jim Henney. And I have to thank the many staff at the OHRC who had a hand in creating and producing the report and in managing the logistics for this launch. That was a challenging project, and this team of our partners were up to the challenge. But the work is not done. Our next step is to take our message on the road across Ontario. We are planning launches in several municipalities, and we will do social media and other campaigns to send our message. And we are looking for your support and help. If you know of events or organizations that would be interested in us, taking part or providing materials, please let us know. All of the materials in your kit are available on our website at www.ohrc.on.ca. Or if you would like extra printed copies of the policy or the textbooks, please send us an email to communications@ohrc.on.ca. I thank you for joining us as we start on the next phase of our work. We look forward to continue to work with you so that together we can make the rights written down in our policy as actual lived rights for people with mental health disabilities and addictions across Ontario. In the end, I express my gratitude on behalf of my colleagues, the commissioners, and of course the Chief Commissioner, Barbara Hall. Thank you.
Thank you, Bagat, very much. Just to note that, to give a shout out to folks who are on social media, especially on Twitter at the moment. Thank you very much for getting the word out. We're seeing lots of retweets. It's very exciting. you can follow us. I think I did this before, and you can continue to follow us, not simply for self-aggrandizement, but also because we're finding social media to be so useful now for getting the word out. And if you want to find out where our next launches of this policy and other policies are going to be, then following us on Twitter or Facebook is one useful way of doing it. At this point, we're going to move to a question and answer segment. I will ask Sherry and Barbara to return to the stage. We have folks circulating with microphones. I am going to be, again, the traffic cop on this. I'm going to be entirely arbitrary about who I choose. I don't see hands very well, so raise them high if you would, and we will try to get to you. Just give us about 2 seconds while Sherry and Barbara come forward, and then we will start with our first questions.
Good morning. I've heard a lot of answers to some questions that I've had in mind, but I have not heard any discussions pertaining to the homeless. I am presently homeless, and I live at Seton House. And there is a tremendous amount of discrimination there. I can tell you from the inside, talking outward. I believe that the CSWs, or community service workers, are not trained well enough to deal with discrimination and disability and mental health issues. I feel that if your frontline staff is not trained properly, then this will continue happening. So I'm asking that the City of Toronto look into this here, because the homeless are the most vulnerable of all. I am one of them. Thank goodness I do have a brain in my head, but the majority of the people that are there, I'd say 80%, have either physical, mental, or addictions, disabilities. So I'd like this to appreciate it if you can look into this matter. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Training is a big part of the work we do, and we certainly will be aggressively doing more training, more public education. We're concerned about issues of homelessness. We've recently intervened in a case at the, Supreme Court? The Court of Appeal on issues related to homelessness. So we hope that the policy will assist on improving the situation of people, but we know it's a big, complex issue, and it will take much more than this policy.
Oh, hi. Marilyn Wilcoxon. My question is with you, Barbara, primarily looking at what do you see as the next step for those of us who are wanting to see Ontario health and safety regulations become more effective in protecting workers who are at risk of mental injury on the job, both because of the nature of the job or because of organizational structures?
Thanks for the question. So we do recognize in the policy some of the real health and safety risks that may exist in workplaces and other social areas covered by the code. But we're also very mindful of employers and others, the need to not to act based on stereotypes or to jump to conclusions prematurely about whether or not somebody actually poses a real risk. We do note the requirements under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. They're important and they're very real. They also need to be implemented with the Ontario Human Rights Code in mind because we have primacy over that legislation.
But I think we're also always looking for ways and opportunities to advance issues. It may be through legislation, it may be through policy at the government level. We regularly appear before standing committees or communicate with ministers with responsibility for particular issues. We also encourage others to do the same and to use and quote our policy in that respect.
Hello to both of you. Great job. Very excited to have seen the material that you presented us. From the Canadian Hearing Society perspective, it's going to mean a lot to deaf and hard of hearing people across Ontario. There is an increase in mental health issues around employment opportunities and access to services, and it's had a huge impact. Just a couple of quick questions. To my understanding, anyone who submits a formal complaint through the commission and then mediation happens, that only happens that individual situation and changes things within that environment wherever that complaint stemmed. It doesn't have a widespread effect. Am I correct about that? And then, sorry, and then my second question is, as the Canadian Hearing Society and many other not-for-profit organizations understand, it's very frustrating for us. The funds that we receive from the government through the LHINs does not provide us with the resources in order that we can expand our mental health services. We have not had an increase in funding in our services for 10 years. And I wonder if there are any recommendations specifically to the government and the LHINs to support agencies and organizations who are supporting people who have mental health issues and addictions, just to help us cut through some of this red tape, the statistic requirements and paperwork that needs to happen in order that we provide direct services. Thank you.
Two tough questions, particularly the second one about resources. I think probably we could go down the rows here and we would all find concerns about need and resources. I don't have an answer to that. I think when those issues of resources have been raised in the context of complaints or the courts, that the message has been that it is within the mandate of government to determine how the resources are allocated. Having said that, I think there may be ways that the policy is useful to underline the existing needs out there and the need to address them. In terms of the individual versus the systemic, complaints, individual complaints, which now go to the Human Rights Tribunal, do focus on individual cases and individual remedies. The Commission, on the other hand, has a mandate now to address systemic issues. So we're always looking for opportunities, both at the tribunal and in other fora, to raise the systemic issues and to work either voluntarily or through litigation or public inquiries to get the systemic change. We can't afford to wait to deal individual by individual by individual.
Sorry, and just to add to that, in our consultation report, Minds That Matter, we made a series of recommendations to government. So specifically, recommendation number 4, the Government of Ontario, whenever considering budget restraint measures that affect services, housing, and employment for people with low income, should particularly take into account the goals identified in its own poverty reduction strategy and the needs of people with psychosocial disabilities, people living in poverty, and other groups protected by the code. We also made another recommendation, recommendation number 5, that the Government of Ontario should enhance and improve social assistance, including reviewing and improving benefits, to make sure that people can afford the necessities of life.
Hi, my name's Gary Malkowski. I also am from the Canadian Hearing Society. First, I want to say congratulations very much around the important term that you've been using, ableism. It's very important that we have policies developed around this, and I'm very hopeful that this document, this report, will assist different organizations and encourage them to set up internal policies as well, anti-ableism policies specifically. I think that's of great import. Congratulations around that particular piece. I think it's pretty brave and pretty bold, and we need to move it forward. Unfortunately, there's not many organizations out there, or including government, who have that kind of anti-ableism policy in place. But hopefully this document will eventually cause people to consider the fact that they need to have an open discussion around these huge issues, and just much like we have the anti-racism policies and racial discrimination policies in place. I'd like to see this policy be that important step to getting Ontario Human Rights Commission guidelines on ableism and disability discrimination into policies in the future. So I think it's a big step. I mean, that's a huge policy, and you're definitely thinking about the future.
Thank you, Gary, for ensuring that that's an issue that's front and center for us at the Commission.
I'm a retired detective inspector with the Ontario Provincial Police, and I suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder and severe anxiety attacks. It's extremely ironic that I'm in a room that I can't sit in. The only way that I could sit is right up against the wall on stage. But however, regardless of that, I pursued the mental health issues since we weren't being looked after through policing, and so we took it through the Ontario Ombudsman. But over the time period, I have had severe discrimination because of my difficulties with airlines and whatnot, but in particular, Workplace Safety and Insurance Board. By the time I go through trying to look after complaints through the WSIB, and by the way, it took them 2.5 years to even decide whether I was fit to receive assistance. By the time I then put in for my payments, etc., I find out I'm being discriminated against for my mental health issues. I go to the Ontario Human Rights, but they say, oh, sorry, we can't help you because it's only a 1-year limitation from the time that it occurred. So I'm just wondering if there's can be possibilities of change to allow for those kind of time frames. If I try to go under a particular organization's policies for addressing these things, quite often it takes far more than a year. So I can't go to the Ontario Human Rights and say, well, I've been discriminated against, when in fact they haven't made a decision yet. And then when they have made the wrong decision, Ontario Human Rights says, oh, sorry, we can't help you.
The code is something that the government put into place and that we take our mandate from. At various times over the years, it's just over 50 years old, it's been amended. Changes have been made. Most recently in 2012, when gender identity and expression, for example, were added to it. We often advocate for changes. I think it's fair to say that real change comes not from us advocating, but from the people affected by legislation advocate. So that's not within our control. When you asked your question, there was applause in the room. I take that as being other people who are frustrated or have experienced the impact of the time limitation. You may want to talk with others. The code keeps changing as people demand change.
Hi, I'm a City of Toronto employee, and I just want to acknowledge both the gentleman who's staying at Seton House and this gentleman who just spoke here. Having many clients who have mental health diagnoses, this space would be very problematic for them with the number of people and how the layout of the room is designed. For the gentleman at Seton House, a good part of my day-to-day work is advocating around and doing education for people who have come to conclusions about clients and giving them alternative explanations for things that they might find difficult to understand. For example, how a homeless person who's been assaulted 10 to 15 times might not feel safe in this space, might be late for an appointment, might not necessarily do things the way we would like them to do them. My concern and issue, though, is more that requesting accommodations for my clients often puts the doctors in the role of being the gatekeeper. Very often, doctors don't know a person's role, their job, their requirements, and for me, as well as being a union rep, it's very difficult for me to advocate for people with doctors not having very much time to devote to this issue and not necessarily having the knowledge or case management experience to be making recommendations. I just wondered if you had any feedback on that.
Thank you for both, and thank you for the comments on the space. That's something that we'll take into account in terms of future planning of events.
Hi.
Hi, Susan.
Hey, how are you? Mine is less of a question and more of a comment. And just remembering how difficult after Bill 107, what was that, 2009, the changes to the Human Rights Commission to do exactly this type of work. I just really feel really thrilled to see you're hitting it on all cylinders, it seems, right now. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, you launched the gender identity policy, discrimination against gender identity and gender expression, and now this really important a document on mental health and addictions. So I just really felt that was, but then not only that, you've got Twitter and Facebook, and so I just really felt like, well done, and I just wanted to pass those comments along. Because it was a difficult transition, so to speak, and so I think these are really good policies that you're working on and bringing forward, and so I think congratulations.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Wojtek, and I came from Uklan in UK. I've got just one little question. While you created this document, I was wondering if you came across any good practices from different countries which you could share with us where they came from, or while I was flipping through the references, I seen that most of them are from Canada or from North America. So I was wondering if you ever considered using the good practices examples from different countries.
I'm not sure I understood your question. I'm sorry.
Whether we use practices from other countries.
Okay. Okay. So when we did the research for both the Minds That Matter consultation report and starting our whole initiative in this area, as well as the legal and social science research for the development of the policy, we do look at international comparative research. Primarily, though, our policies will look at Canadian case law, and we look at social science research that is more international in nature, but the legal research would be mostly based in Canada because we're looking at things like precedents and things that would have a bearing on human rights violations within Ontario. But yes, for the broader social science context, we do look internationally.
Hello, everybody. This question is for Barbara Hall. My question isn't addressing mental health disabilities and addictions. I guess it sort of does in a roundabout way. My question is, have you thought about throwing your hat in the ring for the mayor of Toronto?
I didn't even hear what he said. No, but but if you want to, I'd be happy to give you some advice.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I don't know if, thanks for taking my question. My name is Bo Yi, and I work at Breakaway Addiction Services in Toronto. And we work with a lot of people who are applying for ODSP under addiction and post-traumatic stress. And typically these applications are denied, often even on appeal. So I'm wondering if you have any suggestions for us around supporting people in successfully accessing the ODSP program, particularly when addictions is the primary impairment coupled with PTSD.
So in my presentation, and in the policy, we specifically talk about the under-inclusive nature of some programs that are meant to benefit people with disabilities, and we name ODSP as being one of those. If this is something that you're noticing in your line of work, it could be something that you might consider filing a human rights complaint about, and that would be done with the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario. Our policy makes it quite clear that we perceive that to be a human rights issue.
Sorry, thank you. Would that be like a case-by-case for individuals, or would it be possible to bring together a number of individuals who have been denied?
Yeah, that's a potential. You would start with deciding who would be willing to do that, and they could be heard as a group of people who are affected by the same practice.
Just we often intervene in cases where we see that there is a systemic issue. So I think if you see that and have those concerns, then the place to start would be at the Human Rights Legal Support Center, but we would always be happy to be a part of those discussions and to explore what the options are. Sherry and I will be around.
Thank you so much for all the good questions. Lots of information in your packs that may help you if you have further questions, or please feel free to communicate with us at the OHRC. At this moment, I would like you to stay in your seats for just a moment longer, and I would ask Elder Joanne Dallaire to come to the front and close us off today. Thank you.
One of the things I would like to say in kind of closing off and attempting to, bring us full circle is that often we have a society where the victim has to do the advocating, and in this case that's very important. Myself with physical disabilities, I have anxiety and I've suffered from depression. I learned that I had to ask for what I needed. And sometimes with these issues that we're talking about here today, it's hard for people who need assistance to ask for it. So then we need to find allies. One of the beautiful things about Aboriginal culture is that we believe that everyone comes to the circle of life with equal value. And when we have meetings, we sit in a circle, and it reminds us that no one is above, no one is below, no one is in front, and no one is behind, that we bring to the circle of life the uniqueness of the individual. And I'm going to offer a closing prayer. Wache, Sahakutam, Kashashenishku, Maingandodam, Omishkigo. We say Chimigwich, Creator, for this opportunity to have come and done this launch and speak about the issues that this human rights code is taking care of and helping. I also ask, Creator, that you give to each person who is dealing with mental health issues and addictions, the strength of acceptance. The acceptance that you are not flawed, that there is not something wrong with you, but you come to the world with your unique perception and way of being. I ask that you watch over all of us. I also take this opportunity, Creator, to ask you to please continue to watch over our brothers and sisters who are on our streets, in our jails, our institutions, hospitals, seniors' homes, and shelters. I also ask, Creator, that you give thanks for any plant and animal life that have given of themselves today so that we can move forward. Please continue to support all this good work. And until we meet again, I say, Chimigwech, 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 Chimigwech. Oh, all my relations.